Joining us now, Sheriff David Clarke. Sheriff Clarke is with a new organization. He's on the board of directors of Build the Wall, Inc. Sheriff, great to have you.
John, it's great to be with you, and good morning to your listeners once again.
Sheriff, we got a lot to talk about today. Let's start with, we're going to go to Mueller, but I got to start with your Chicago guy. What is the deal with Jesse Smollett getting off, especially after the Chicago police had that 45-minute press conference absolutely blasting the guy about a month ago? What happened?
This stinks to high heaven. I think everybody kind of knows that there was some prosecutorial mischief going on here from some of the reports. This was an abuse of power. It's a miscarriage of justice that went on. But it's not anything unusual for Cook County, where Chicago is the major city. Cook County, Illinois, is long known for being corrupt. This was a politically motivated decision. I think the Attorney General of the state of Illinois needs to call for an investigation. This woman, Kimberly Fox, has political connections that go beyond just being elected. And I think that once the layers are peeled back on this, we're going to find out that there was some chicanery that went on here, and it cannot stand. This weakens people's trust in the judicial system. And you know, she owes more than what she offered. This was very shabbily done. Look, I'm a 40-year law enforcement veteran. I've dealt with a lot of criminal cases. She talked about this being an alternative prosecution in Wisconsin. We call it deferred prosecution, but they're not handled like that. Usually they're handled where the prosecutor will say, I'm going to hold this open for 6 or 9 months, a year, whatever. And if you stay out of trouble, you do some community service, you pay a fine, you pay the police back for all of their time, the overtime, and then I won't proceed with these charges. But she didn't do it that way. This thing, these charges were handed down by a grand jury, so she sidestepped that. And she has the authority to do that under an alternative prosecution. But she has to make a detailed record, and she didn't. She said very little. She's in hiding right now. This cannot stand. This clown Smollett held America at bay, basically slimed and smeared Trump supporters who weren't even involved in this. Two wearing the MAGA hats, saying this is MAGA country. This guy is a heterophobe. He's a racist, and he's a bigot.
And so what happens now? He just gets off scot-free, or do the feds get involved? What happens, Sheriff Clarke?
Well, we'll see with the Chicago police. They've recommended that the U.S. Justice Department do an investigation into this. I think, though, that the Attorney General needs a whack at this first. The Attorney General of the state of Illinois, on the public's behalf, needs to conduct a hearing because this Kimberly Fox, I think that's what her name is, the state's attorney for Cook County, she owes an explanation to the people of Illinois first and to America as well. She should have held a news conference and had the chief there, the mayor there, and any other particulars, and announced in full what her decision was and why, and she didn't do it. So, let's wait and see what the state attorney general does with this thing. The Justice Department has been recommended. Don't forget, Smollett still faces a federal investigation, mail fraud, for sending himself a hate letter. That's mail fraud. That's a serious felony. Let's see what happens there as well.
Well, Sheriff, I mean, obviously, the police chief's press conference, right? Remember that it went on for over 30 minutes. That is very rare for cops to do that, to have that kind of a press conference and lay out publicly that amount of dirty laundry and evidence against someone. You would have think they would have been in communication with the prosecutors and the state's attorney, and they would have been all on the same page. You would have thought that before they went forward with this, right? When you were sheriff of Milwaukee, you wouldn't have that kind of a statement without having talked to the prosecutor's team. I don't understand that.
Yeah, correct. And the Chicago superintendent, Eddie Johnson, was left out of this. He shouldn't have been. In my experience as a sheriff, when you had a big, high-profile case, we call it, like this, the prosecutor stays in contact with either the chief or the sheriff, if it's a sheriff case that's being investigated, and you stay on the same page. You let them know what's going to happen. Ultimately, the prosecutor gets to make the decision. and maybe the sheriff or the chief, maybe I would have been disappointed, but I would have been informed and I would have been told why. None of this happened, which is why I say this stinks. The other thing that goes on in an alternative prosecution, which she's claiming this was, is that they usually make the defendant show remorse and apologize for what he or she did. None of that happened here. As a matter of fact, Smollett was allowed a platform to go out yesterday, hold a press conference, and maintain his innocence, for heaven's sakes. You know, that's how dirty this thing is. Mm-hmm. So like I said, you know, people aren't stupid. Everyone that sees this, everyone that's heard about it, read about it, and learned what happened yesterday. I mean, when I first saw the first news story on this and it said charges dropped, what my thought was, because he was facing 16 counts, I thought, yeah, they're going to get down to some sort of plea agreement here. They probably dropped many of the charges and held 3 or 4 of them and said, hey, you're going to plead to these. That's what I thought when it said charges dropped. And then when I found out all 16 had been dropped, John, I was floored by that decision.
Well, it's tough to floor Sheriff David Clarke, who's with us now, former sheriff of Milwaukee County in Wisconsin. He is now America's Sheriff. You can go to americasheriff.com. Sheriff Clarke, you're also a newly instated member of the board of directors of the organization Build the Wall, Inc. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. It's webuildthewall.org. People can go to the website, poke around, but what it is it's a citizen action movement started by Brian Colfax, who's a U.S. veteran, triple amputee, wounded in a rocket attack, serving his country over in Iraq. And when he sat around, and like many of us, and we watched during this government shutdown, the Congress abdicate their responsibility to do something about the southern border, the porous, open southern border, he decided to step up and started a GoFundMe page to raise money from American citizens to build a wall. You know, originally it was going to give it to the government to help build a wall, but then he decided that wasn't a good idea. It would just go into the U.S. Treasury and be wasted, probably spent on illegal alien programs. Right. So he started this thing and put together this organization, webuildthewall.org, and asked me to be on the board of advisors. I was more than honored. I was humbled, actually, to be asked to be on it. And what we're going to do, I've been out, you know, I was down at the southern border. As a matter of fact, you and I talked on your program. I was down at the border in Big Bend, Sanderson County, and I met with ranchers, and I met with farmers down there who were under siege through because of our porous southern border. Their barns, their sheds, their homes are being broken into. They're being confronted by illegal aliens, threatened, so on and so forth. And they've been let down by their government. They're getting no help from the federal government to protect themselves. And so we're going to step up now, and we're going to find those locations where illegal aliens are crossing onto private lands, and we're going to build barriers and walls to funnel those people over to checkpoints that the Border Patrol can then better police this thing, instead of trying to do it over this vast 2,000 miles of southern border. So we're going to work with individual landowners and farmers on private property to build barriers and walls to protect them from illegal aliens.
So basically, if you can go to a property owner that's at the border and say, look, I'd like to put this wall up. Now, do you have to go through local zoning ordinances or any of that nature? Because, like, if I try to put so much as a fence up in my neighborhood, I got HOAs and zoning ordinance. How do they deal with that?
Yeah, you know, in Texas, that's why we're going to start in Texas. The Texas laws are a little more friendly toward landowners, and there are some ordinances and there are some laws, but what we learned, because this is very, we've thought through this a lot, and we've done our due diligence. We've got lawyers involved to check out the ordinances, so on and so forth. Texas is a friendly state as it relates to landowners, and so there aren't as many restrictions as like what you're talking about and what I'm familiar with. Texas doesn't operate that way, so it's going to be easier to, on private land, on private property, erect these things in an efficient manner, by the way, much cheaper than the federal government is going to be able to do it, even on, along the border that's regulated by the feds.
I think it's a great idea. We had Steve Bannon on a week ago. He was talking about it as well. I believe he was involved in it. He was down there, and now he's in Rome. But look, sometimes you got to take matters in your own hands. We're with America's Sheriff, Sheriff David Clarke. You can learn more about the sheriff. Go to americasheriff.com. That's americasheriff.com. Sheriff Clarke, the Mueller investigation, 2,800 subpoenas, $25 million, 2 years, 500 witnesses, 500 search warrants, 19 lawyers, 36 investigators. They had 230 communiques confiscated. They had phone tapping. They have eavesdropping, and they got nothing. And the fake news legacy media is still lying about it today, even when the president's been exonerated. What do you make of this whole thing, Sheriff?
Well, first of all, that report just reaffirmed what we already knew from the very beginning. If it took Robert Mueller 2 years, $25 million, all those subpoenas, wiretaps, and lawyers to figure out there was no Russia collusion, then he's not very smart and he's not very good as a prosecutor, because that could have been done probably in about 90 days. And as far as the obstruction, the same thing. There was no obstruction of justice. So it just reinforced what we already knew. But it appears that America's nightmare as it relates to that sham against the sitting president is coming to an end. Of course, the Democrats are going to continue to dig their heels in. That's all they had. They lie, they cheat, they steal. They've done nothing but smear this president. They've done nothing but stand in the way of the will of the people who went out and voted and elected Donald Trump the 45th president of the United States. Mm-hmm. So now what all the Democrats are left with now, their new talking point is, we want to see the full report, release the full report. Well, the reason they're saying that is because you can't release the full report. Some of it has to be redacted. So they've already set up their next move after that. Should Bill Barr or the president, Attorney General Bill Barr, or the president decide to release a redacted form, the Democrats will say, no, we want the full report. See, this is just a political ploy. This is just their new talking point. But America has seen through this, and they're not going to put up with it for 2 months longer. I think the Democrats are damaging themselves, and so as far as I'm concerned, I hope they continue on this path, because I think the American people have seen enough and have heard enough about this nonsense. They want this country to move forward. They want to address, for Congress to address the things like close that open border on the South. We need an infrastructure bill. We need the tax cuts to become permanent. And we also need to protect our gun laws, as the Democrats have put forth a bill in the House, passed a bill. It's not going anywhere in the Senate, but a massive gun confiscation and gun control bill. Those are the things the American people want the Congress to work on. And, of course, all they do in Washington, D.C., I wrote a column this week in townhall.com, Washington Follies, the Mueller report. That's all that goes on in Washington, D.C. is theater.
Yeah, what about the fact that they voted in the Senate on this new Green Deal and 47 Democratic senators vote present? Like, they don't even have the guts to vote yes or no. Now, a couple of the Democrats, like Joe Manchin and the lady, the new senator from Arizona, her name just slips me here, Angus King from Maine, they voted no and just said it was stupid. I mean, they just said this is dumb. But 47 senators, Democratic senators, vote present. Is that a profile in courage or what?
Yeah, what a bunch of cowards. You know, they spew hot air. They were all behind it when this nutcase Ocasio-Cortez announced this goofy idea. As a matter of fact, Kamala Harris on the campaign trail, she's a candidate for President of the United States, Democrat nominee anyway, and she said she supported it. She said that on the campaign trail. Elizabeth Warren, another candidate for the Democrat nomination for president, on the campaign trail said she supported this new Green Deal. Cory Booker has said he supports this new Green Deal. Most of the candidates who have announced have said they support it. And then when push came to shove, when it was time to put up or shut up, all of a sudden these people laid down. These are a bunch of cowards. They have no integrity whatsoever. Here was a chance for them to show what they stood for, to show if they had core values, to show if they had a core, to show if they had leadership capability, if they had courage, and they have none of the above.
Well, even the co-sponsor of the bill, Senator Ed Markey in Massachusetts voted president, and he co-sponsored it. So the whole thing is just it is a hypocrisy to the Democrats knows no grounds. We're out of time. Sheriff David Clarke, always good to have you. Opening day, Sheriff. One day tomorrow, opening day baseball. I know you'll be rooting for your Cubs. I'll be rooting for your Astros. And we will see you, sir, next week. Thank you.
Appreciate it, John. Be well.